Hello and welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman. If you have been working with me on your 52-week series of scrappy blocks, you should have quite a few scrappy blocks ready to go to put into a sampler quilt. And so today what I want to share with you is how I'm starting to work on this Quilt As You Go sampler quilt. I'm going to share with you all of the fabrics and the batting and so forth. Everything that you'll need, you'll find in a PDF that's attached. Make sure that you download that PDF so you'll have that information. And I'm going to share with you how I am going to put together a sampler quilt. I'm going to put together 25 blocks, and it's going to be a good size quilt. So in front of me here, you'll see a lot of the fabrics and the materials that I'm going to need to create my Quilt As You Go sampler quilt. Of course, there's the PDF. Make sure you download that. The photo here basically just shows you from the back of the quilt, if you will. So this would be the backs of each of those. There's going to be sashing that's required for the front and the back. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to be using. You're going to need batting. You're going to need sashing fabric. You're going to need backing fabric. And then, of course, you need all of your sampler blocks that you have been working on over the last almost 40 weeks now. So I've got tons and tons of them here. Like I said, my sampler quilt is going to be 25. I'm going to have 5 rows wide, 5 rows down. So I'll have 25 blocks in my sampler quilt. And let me share with you how I'm going to put this together. So the first thing that I did was identified which fabrics I wanted for my the back of my quilt. So these are the 12.5-inch squares that I cut for the back of each of my quilt blocks. And they're 12.5 inches square, just like our block is 12.5 inches square. I also cut batting. You might want to cut your batting at 12 inches instead of 12.5. That eliminates the 1/4 inch of batting in your seam allowances. Anyway, so I cut 25 of the 12.5-inch backings. I'm going to need 25 of the 12-inch battings. And one thing to keep in mind when you're cutting your battings, this is a great opportunity for you to use up batting strips that are left over from all of your other quilt projects. And if you need to piece them together, there's a product called Heat Press. And I got this one at my quilt shop here in town, or near me where I live. And it's just a wonderful product that it's fusible, really. There's fuse on one side, and you can butt up the 2 pieces of batting together. I'm not sure if you can see this real well, but I have butted up the batting, and I've placed this across that open area there where the 2 pieces were butted together, and pressed it, and it works beautifully. You'll see there's the back of it. There's the front of it. I use this product a lot, even for regular quilts. If I need just another piece that needs to be added, I definitely use this product. So this might be something you want to check out. It's called Heat Press Batting Together. It's a wonderful product. And so I went through, I have got a bin of leftover pieces of batting, and I just went through and pieced some of them together as I needed to. And I'll be able to use these as I am quilting my sampler quilt using the Quilt As You Go method. So you need 25 of your backs, you need 25 of your battings. You also need sashing. And you can find Quilt As You Go technique that I taught on a table runner. I'll link that below. In fact, I think I'll grab that table runner and bring it here in just a minute so that you can see it. But you're going to cut your sashings, and I give you the information in here for what you need for your sashings. The front sashings that are going to be on the front of the quilt are right here. I'm using this fabric right here, and it's got both a warm and a cool color to it. The background has a warm undertone, but the white dots have a cool undertone, so I'm kind of playing on both warm and cool because my sampler blocks definitely have warms and cools in them. But for the front sashing, they are cut 4 inches wide, 12.5 inches long, and you'll need 30 of those. So I have all of those cut, and I pressed them lengthwise, matching the raw edges. So they are all pressed lengthwise, matching the raw edges, and they are wrong sides together. And so we need 30 of those. You also need the backing sash, and these are 2 inches wide, and they are going to go on the back. And I'm going to show you how that's done here in just a moment. Before I show you how to do the sashing on the blocks, I just wanted to remind you, you can certainly go out to the 3-part series of this Quilt As You Go table runner. It started out teaching you how to do these foundation paper or piecing with strips, and I used dryer sheets for the backing on this, and I also used dryer sheets for the border as well, and it's all just like crumb quilts and strips and so forth. And then I also taught you some applique, and I did Quilt As You Go for these blocks here. Now for these blocks, as you'll see, I did some more intense quilting on each of the blocks. I'm not going to do as intense quilting on the sampler block, but I'll show you that here in a moment. But I quilted these, and then these were the sashings that I had put in here. They're all that green fabric. And I'll link, it's part 1, 2, and 3 to get through this wonderful table runner, but it's a really fun one. I hope that you'll check it out and try it. It's a real beautiful one. It's a great way to use up lots of crumbs, lots of scraps, and just have fun with it. So this is a Quilt As You Go technique that I used for this table runner. I'm going to use the same technique for this sampler quilt. So the first thing you obviously need to do before you can sash the quilt together is to get each of the quilt blocks quilted. And that is what I have done with a couple of these. I'm going to use some very simple quilting on this one. I basically did a grid, and it was all just eyeball. I did not get real fancy in this. You could certainly, I would recommend using your ruler and getting some lines, grid lines on there for you, but it's simply a grid. That's what I've done on it, and that's what I'm going to do on all of the blocks. I'm going to create a grid so that it's quilted but not too intense. So what you'll want to do is take your backing fabric and your batting, which is what I have done here, and lay your backing upside down so that the wrong side is facing you. Lay your batting on top of that, which is what I've done here. I'm just going to show you this one since I've already got it prepared. So I have my backing down, it's right side is down, wrong side's facing me, batting is on top of that, and there should be around 1/4 of an inch seam allowance available on the batting. If you cut your batting smaller than your 12.5 inch blocks, that will eliminate some of the bulk in the seam allowances. And here is my block, and I've laid that on top of it. And what I do is just kind of press it like this. You could certainly use those basting adhesive sprays, but if you do that, I would recommend doing the spraying outdoors. I have asthma, so those sprays are something that I cannot use. But I simply, when I did these, I simply went through and just made sure everything was laying very nicely. And then I used 4 simple pins. You can use safety pins if you choose. I'm just using simple straight pins, and I put them in each of the corners about like so. And then I put my walking foot on my sewing machine, and I am simply doing straight line quilting using my walking foot and creating a grid. Just very simple. So I'm going to quilt all of them the same way, putting the batting, the backing, and the top together, making sure that everything is laying nicely and flat, and start with a grid. I'll probably start like this and do it in this fashion, and then maybe come around the circle and maybe something in the center. Nothing real fancy, just enough to secure the block. So that's what I'm going to do first with all 25 blocks, is get them quilted. From your batting, you'll also need to cut your sashes, and the PDF gives you all the information on what you need to cut. I have some 1 inch wide by 12 inch wide sashes here from my batting, which will be attached in here. So to connect these, and I connect them in rows, so I can connect the rows together, and then I'll connect those with longer sashes once the rows are all put together. But the first thing I'm going to do is take my this sashing here, which is the top sashing or the front sashing of the quilt. These are the 4-inch wide by 12.5-inch long strips that I mentioned earlier. They're folded wrong sides together, pressed, so the raw edges are even. So I need one of those, which you see attached here. I also need one of the back sashing, and this matches the backing fabric, and it is 2 inches wide by 12.5 inches long. And what we do is simply attach, we fold the top sashing raw edges meeting to the front of the block, and the back sashing, we attach it raw edges meeting on the back, and we stitch it all the way down. And so what we've accomplished then is we have the back sashing and the front sashing ready to go. They're all attached. Now what I want to share with you is how we're going to sew this to the next block. So we're going to sew 5 blocks in each row, and then we're going to sew the top sashing, which I'll show you later. So I'm simply going to take the back of the next block and pin it to the back of that sashing, the back sashing. And I'll pin it out here, and then I'll show you what that looks like. So if you look at this, it is pinned, and then it will eventually be sewn like this. So I'm going to sew this block to that back sashing. I don't have that pinned very evenly. I've got to make sure that's more even. Match up your back edges nicely. And then you're going to sew 1/4 inch down here. So I'm going to take that to the machine, and I'm going to sew that, and I'll come back and show you what it looks like. All right, I have sewn this next block to that back sashing. As you can see here, it has been sewn. This is what it looks like on the back. That's the line that I've just stitched. There we go. I'm going to keep it oriented the same way so that it looks the same for you. But that has been stitched, so that sashing and this one, that's the back sashing, this is the front sashing. It's waiting for batting. So that's where these 1-inch wide strips come in, and we're going to attach those in between those 2 seam allowances there. We don't want to add any more bulk under these 2 seam allowances, so you want to make sure that the batting is right in between there. If you need to trim some of the batting away, go ahead and do that. But mine fits in there very nicely. And now I'm going to bring this front sashing over, and I'm simply going to pin on this side. I'm pinning through all layers. And then what I'm going to do is edge stitch this down. I will edge stitch about 1/8 inch away from the edge there. I'm also going to do the same on this side. I will edge stitch 1/8 inch from this side. Even though this one is already secure, that will have a matching edges on both sides. And then you can come in the center and do a center stitch or 2. Maybe you could do a decorative stitch in there, and that will secure the batting in there. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to quilt, first of all, each and every one of my 25 blocks. I'm going to get those quilted using the walking foot and do some straight line quilting. Then I'm going to get them all put together in 5 rows of 5 and attach the short sashings and the batting and have them all ready to go. In a couple of weeks, I am going to come back with a new video. I'll review what we've done, and then I'm going to show you how to do the long sashings, which will attach all of the rows together. So we'll show you that as well as the borders, because then we're going to do the quilt as you go method for the borders also. This next week, I will be out of state teaching, so I won't be able to accomplish anything on this for another week. But at the end of next week, I'll be able to get to work on more of my quilts. I want to get all of these blocks quilted up, and then I'll get some more sashing done. And hopefully the following week, I can put together video number 2, part 2 of this sampler quilt as you go quilt so you'll know how to do the long sashing as well as the borders. I do want to point out for your backing, if you want to have every square on the back of your sampler to be a different color, a different fabric, that would be wonderful. That would be a great way not only to use up scrap stash, but it would make a very colorful backing. I chose to just use the same, but it occurred to me as I was working with it, I thought this would be fun if I would have used a different 12.5-inch square of fabric for each, and for the backing on each one. So have fun with this. Use up your scrap stash. That's the purpose of all of the videos that I'm giving to you, is just try to help you to come up with ideas and fun, simple ways to use up your scraps, create some beautiful quilts, and hope you'll enjoy and try this quilt as you go method. This is a technique. There's many quilt as you go techniques that are out there. This is the one that I enjoy. It's the one that I like to teach, and I hope that you'll enjoy it as well. So until next time, I hope that you'll be working hard at using up that scrap stash, making up beautiful quilts with it, using some of these wonderful patterns that I've put out on my YouTube channel. So have fun, enjoy, and happy quilting.